Hi everybody, welcome back to our rhetoric class. This is our first online lecture. This is for Tuesday, March 24th. We will be talking about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from a Birmingham jail today. And so my last video that I posted, there are 10 of you in the class. The last video got about 17 views. So unless most of you just love the sound of my voice and have been watching the video more than once, we've picked up some randos. So welcome to our class, random people who are bored during quarantine and want to learn about rhetoric. I hope you learned something. Let us know a little something about yourself in the comments below. So first off, we're just going to update on class policies. So obviously we have to measure attendance and participation differently because we're not meeting in person now. So I'm not going to be super strict on attendance. Obviously that's not feasible. But based on your responses to the survey that I sent out the other day, I know all of you have at least some level of computer access. And so I still expect you to comply with class deadlines to whatever extent possible, including the fact that SA2 is still due on Friday. And again, if you are in a situation where computer access is an issue or you have extenuating circumstances, taking care of a family member, taking care of a sibling, etc., please let me know. I will work with you. This is not me being a jerk. This is me trying to maintain some structure. But as always, I am more than happy to accommodate whatever kind of situation that you're in. So again, thank you to those of you who filled out the survey about how we want to do our online class. Based on responses to the survey, I've decided that we are going to have one YouTube lecture per week and one video conference per week. I made this decision for several reasons. The first is that it was the best compromise because their answers were pretty across the board, from like wanting to have exactly the same as normal class, just doing all the lectures on a video chat, or people saying no class meetings, all YouTube. And I understand the reasoning behind both of those things, and so the best compromise was to half and half. The second reason is that many of you did not fully answer the questions on the survey that I sent out, or you didn't answer it at all, or you haven't been responding to personal emails that I've sent you, and I don't know why. Some of you are probably just overwhelmed, have too many things going on, but I think the opportunity for us to talk face-to-face will be helpful with that, particularly because we have so many pieces of SA3 assignments coming up. I want you guys to be sure that you are answering all parts of the question and fully following directions. And so some people are better at that when they read it. Some people are better at that when we have a conversation. And so I just don't want anyone to fall through the cracks. And the third and most important reason that I want us to have video conferences, at least sometimes, is because I really want to meet everybody's pets. So our first video conference call will be this Thursday. We'll do it through a Canvas extension called WebEx, and I will send you the link to that. And so we'll get on at 3:30. It'll be like our normal class time on Thursday. And so when you log on, just have your pet nearby so we can all meet each other's animals to brighten up our quarantine. I decided to do something with my pet, my cat, the other day during my quarantine. So I have this little backpack that I use when I take him to the vet, and he straps in. I'll put a picture in now. And so I decided, he spends all his time like screaming at windows and stuff, like he really wants to go outside. So I was like, okay, I'll put him in his little backpack. We'll take a walk outside. So we went outside in his backpack, and we came back from the walk, and it was clear on his little face that he did not enjoy it. So I hope everyone is finding ways to stay sane and entertained during all this, and to keep your stress at bay. Please let me know if there's anything I can do. I know a lot of your classes are probably kind of in flux right now. I know you may have not even heard from some of your professors yet. So I'm trying to communicate with you and be as clear as possible without overwhelming you with contact. So again, please reach out if you need anything, or if there's anything that I can help you with. And so back to class policies. Participation is a big part of your grade. And so we're going to determine your participation grade through our video conferences. So you need to participate in those conferences. if you're able. And again, if you're not, I'm not going to dock your grade, but you have to communicate with me about whether or not you can be there. And if you cannot come to the conference, you need to let me know. And I'm saying if you are unable to, not that you don't want to, okay? I know many of you probably are not interested in joining the video chat, but if you are able to, I expect you to be there because we need each other to form a class. So if you just don't want to do it, that's not an excuse. So I will be sending out the links to the week's YouTube videos and WebEx conferences each Monday, possibly sometimes on Sundays, depending on how the week goes, but you will have it in advance. And we will also be using WebEx for office hours. So when you need an appointment with me, you can just send me an email and we'll pick a time. And then I set up a time through WebEx and I'll email you the link to that. The discussion board questions will also be posted on Mondays. Those are on a timer, so they will show up at 8 a.m. on Monday mornings. And you will have until midnight on Wednesdays to answer them. That is just so that I can incorporate them into our discussions on Thursdays. And so the criteria for the discussion board, there's only a few questions. For this week, there's only 3. So what you have to do in order to fulfill the requirements for discussion board, you need to provide an original answer to each question. And then you need to respond to at least one classmate's answer to at least one question. So you're not going to be able to see any responses until you respond yourself. So you'll craft your original answers. You'll number it. You'll say 1, and then your answer to number 1, 2, your answer to number 2, etc. It'll all be in one response. And then your classmates can come in and respond. So like, let's say that Noor posts something really interesting for number 1, and then she has her answer to 2 and 3. I can come in and respond. I'm going to put a number 1, so we know what question I'm responding to. And I'll say, Noor, I think your point is really interesting. In addition, blah, blah, blah. So your responses have to be substantive, right? So saying something like, great comment, or I agree, or you sound really smart, or yeah, those don't count. Okay, your response needs to add something. So you know how there's always somebody in every class who's like, to piggyback off of that, we all need to be that guy on discussion board. And again, those conversations will probably be incorporated into our Thursday discussions. So we will probably spend part of Thursday talking about a letter from a Birmingham jail as well, just so that we get the chance to have that face-to-face conversation. So this is normally the time when I would say, does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions? But I can't do that right now. So please let me know the questions that you have up to this point via email. You can comment on this video. You can ask via Canvas. You can ask in Thursday's conversation, whatever you need to do. And I will send out as much of this information as possible in writing as well. So moving on to the substance of the day, King's letter from a Birmingham jail. So if you have not already read the letter, I want you to go ahead and pause the video right now and read it. I highly recommend that you follow the link on Canvas to listen to Dr. King read it himself. It's very powerful. Welcome back, now that you've all listened to and read the letter. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background and context for the origins of the letter. So in 1963, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference decided to hold a nonviolent protest campaign in Birmingham. They were protesting segregation laws. And so their plan was that they were going to protest through civil disobedience. So they were going to have integrated protesters in public spaces. And so based on that, they would fill up the jails. And so Birmingham would have to make a decision because they didn't have any more space in their jails for more serious crimes. This was a popular civil rights protest technique. This plan didn't work, though, because many people were not willing to be arrested for the cause. They were not willing to go to jail for the fight against segregation. And on top of that, there were many white moderates who claimed to support the cause. They were white people who were against segregation, but they were also not willing to be part of the protest. And their reasoning behind that, some of them were not willing to be arrested, and some of them said the timing wasn't right. And then another barrier to this protest was that there were a bunch of attorneys in Birmingham who filed a federal injunction that said you cannot hold a demonstration without a permit from the city. And guess what? The city is not going to give you a permit to protest against itself. or to break the law. And so this meant that either they had to cancel the protest or that the protesters had to be okay with not only violating local laws, but violating a federal court order, a federal injunction, which obviously deterred a lot of people. And so Dr. King chose to lead a march through Birmingham anyway, and he was arrested peacefully. He knew that that was the consequence of his actions, and he went to jail for 8 days. And that was where he wrote this letter. And so the day after he was arrested, the local paper in Birmingham printed a letter. It was an open letter signed by 8 clergymen. They were criticizing King's demonstration, and they were encouraging local Black citizens to follow the law. They were saying you need to comply with the law. Breaking the law, civil disobedience is not the way to further this cause. You need to just wait and racial issues will resolve themselves, essentially. And so King got a hold of this newspaper, and obviously he wanted to respond to this letter that was attacking him, essentially. And so the letter that you read is his response to the clergyman's letter in the newspaper. And so the conventional story of how the letter from a Birmingham jail was composed is that King started writing it in the margins of that newspaper with the clergyman's letter in it, and then there was a sympathetic guard at the prison who started slipping him scraps of paper, and then eventually his lawyer gave him a legal pad where he wrote it, and he was able to send all of it back to his his headquarters where he was working on social justice movements, and have a secretary type it up. Story is probably true to some extent, but the letter was not published until a couple of weeks after King posted bail and got out of jail. So it's very likely that he was able to revise and edit and redraft. It also means, he was able to add in a lot of those powerful quotations that are a really great part of the letter, because he probably hadn't memorized, Buber and Abraham Lincoln and Martin Luther and all these quotes from the Bible, and there's so many quotes in there, like it's not likely that he just was in jail like, I know all this word for word. But the fact that it was originally drafted in a prison cell is an important piece of history and an important part of the context of the letter. And so I want to talk a little bit about the structure of the letter and what it's doing rhetorically. So, like I mentioned, this is a response to the letter from the clergyman. And it's so direct and so clear that you don't even have to have read the clergyman's letter to know what it said, which is really interesting for a Black man in this time to so directly respond to and criticize a group of respected white people. So he starts with his introduction, where he makes it clear. He says, "To my fellow clergymen," right? So he's using the word fellow. He's equating himself with them, and he's saying, "I'm calling you out." And so then the body of the letter, he just shoots down every piece of the clergyman's letter. So the first thing that they claimed was that King is an outsider. So they were saying this guy who's not even from here comes into Birmingham and is trying to stir the pot. Don't listen to him. Don't follow him. Black citizens of Birmingham who have lived here for a long time, follow the rules, protect yourself. This is your home. It's so much easier to come in from the outside when you get to leave, essentially. And so he refutes that. And then he moves on. They claim that he and his supporters should negotiate rather than demonstrate. So that's the whole idea of you need to operate within the law. You can't protest the law by breaking the law is essentially what they were trying to argue. And King refutes that by saying, out of respect for the law, I have to break unjust laws, and then I will happily accept the punishment. I'm literally sitting in jail right now. I understand that that's the consequence of my action, but because I have so much respect for civility and for the law, I have to oppose unjust laws. The next complaint that he addresses, they said that his demonstration was ill-timed. He shouldn't have done it at the time that he did because Birmingham had just elected a new mayor. And this is where King talks about his disappointment with the white moderate. And he's basically saying the timing is inconvenient for you. When is the time right? There's always going to be a reason not to do this. and you're always going to be able to find an excuse not to support us, but that's exactly what it is. It's an excuse. And white moderates, you claim to be on our side, but you're even more dangerous to us than the Klan, is what King is saying, because you are trying to say that you're an ally. The Klan, they announce themselves as our enemies. We know where we stand. But the white moderate is saying they're on our side. But when push comes to shove, oh, the timing's not right. They're not willing to be arrested. They're not really part of the cause because they're not willing to put aside their own privilege. So then the next complaint he addresses is that nonviolent direct action precipitates violence. So the clergymen are saying, yeah, it's nonviolent now, but if this keeps going, it's going to become violent. And King is really trying to separate himself from Malcolm X, from Black nationalists or Black separatists, who were advocating violence at the time. So Malcolm X was saying, they've been violent toward us. Why do we have to be nonviolent in our response? And, we've been nonviolent for centuries and that's not working. And so it's time to fight fire with fire. And King was really trying to separate himself from that philosophy because he didn't think that it would work and he didn't think that he would be taken seriously. And so he wanted to say, like, look, I'm going to rebel against this, but I'm not going to be violent. I'm willing to have the conversation, but no one's listening to me until I take these extreme measures and get arrested and have big rallies and stuff. No one's being hurt by those rallies, but we're going to keep doing that until you listen to us. But that also doesn't mean that we're violent. Now, that was not entirely true, right? Black people who participated in civil disobedience, they suffered quite a lot of violence. You've seen the photos of people being dragged down the street by dogs and sprayed down with fire hoses and, shot by police officers and, all kinds of horrible, horrible things. And of course, sometimes that devolved into violence, right? But Dr. King felt that it was very, very important to maintain you can protest nonviolently. It does not have to come to violence. You can break unjust laws and still respect their consequences and respect how the law works. You can respect the spirit of justice. So the next problem or complaint that he refuted, the clergyman said that Black people just needed to be patient because racial problems will just resolve themselves over time. And King was basically like, no, we've been here for so long and nothing has gotten any better. When exactly is it time? How long has to pass before we know that it's not going to resolve itself? And how can we just not take action and just assume that this is going to be fine? People are clearly not willing to take the steps to solve these problems because when we speak out about it in these nonviolent ways, people get really angry and we suffer and Black people die. And we are still not allowed all of the freedoms of an American. We are still not allowed to live our lives in the way that white Americans are. And so he rejects that. The next point that he refutes, the clergyman accused King and his supporters of being extremists. And again, he's trying to separate himself from Malcolm X. He's saying, we're not extremists. We are reasonable people, right? We want to have a civil conversation with you. And this is where he expresses his disappointment with the white clergy. He's talking about, wasn't Jesus an extremist for saying to love? Wasn't Amos an extremist when he said, let justice roll down like a mighty water? And he's saying, like, we all say that we ascribe to the same faith that's built on these principles of love, radical, extreme love. And that's what we're trying to do, but you won't band with us because it's not convenient for you or because you might have to give something up. And didn't Jesus do that? That was Jesus's whole thing, right? He gave up everything out of love, even though he didn't have to, in order to help other people. And so he's really appealing to Christianity. And that's part of why he was a reverend as well, but part of why he's depending so hard on all of the Christianity metaphors and allusions and values throughout this whole letter is because he's responding to clergy. And so he's kind of trying to call them out and be like, from what I understand, this is what it means to be a Christian. And so if you were really a Christian, you would be helping us in these ways. You wouldn't be afraid to accept the consequences. And he talks about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And the Daniel in the lion's den and all these people who had to face punishment because they trusted that God would save them because they were in the right. And then finally, the last point that he refutes is that the Birmingham police deserve praise, because the clergymen are saying, follow the law, don't break the law and nothing's bad is going to happen to you. And King is like, no, the police shoot Black people all the time. The police, they antagonize our children. They assume that, our children are gang members, or, they use drugs and things like that. And so he's saying, no, we're not going to praise the police. We're going to criticize them out of respect for the law, because that is not how the law is supposed to work. And so then he concludes his letter, and he's, kind of like given this huge long letter that's just like, no, 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 no. And then at the end, he's just kind of like, if I'm wrong about anything, let me know. Love you, So that is kind of the bare bones outline of this letter. That is historically and rhetorically significant, important. And so for your discussion board questions, what I want you to think about, number one, the question is just, what is your initial reaction to this letter? So as you read it and listened to it, I know some of you have probably read it in high school, and some of you, it might have been the first time just now. But on this reading, just after you went through it this time, what are you thinking about? What are you feeling? What is your reaction? And then in the second question, we get to the rhetorical things, because, hi, this is a rhetoric class. So the question says, Dr. King uses many rhetorical devices throughout this letter. What do you think is his most effective rhetorical strategy? Provide at least one direct quote from the letter to support your claim. So remember, claim, evidence, warrant. That's still happening. So claim, what is his most effective rhetorical strategy? Evidence, show me where he has used that strategy. Warrant, why is it effective? So if you like his use of metaphor, if you like his biblical allusions, if you like the people that he has quoted, if you like something about the structure, like find something that you can encapsulate in a quote and tell me why that was the most effective thing. Like after you've read the speech and you're thinking back on it, what quotes stick out in your mind? Think about why, if you're having trouble deciding on something. And then the third and final question for this week. This letter was written and circulated during the civil rights movement. Supposedly, that movement was successful, and we now live in a post-racism era. However, many of the issues King describes probably sounded familiar to you from modern news. So choose one race-based issue that King discusses that still occurs today. Why do you think that is still happening in a post-civil rights movement America? So those are the questions for you to answer this week. And again, your response needs to be numbered 1, 2, 3, where you have your answers to all of those questions. And then you need to respond to a classmate, number 1, 2, or 3 to show which one of their responses you are responding to. And then Thursday, we will have our WebEx meeting. If you need me between now and then, of course, send me an email. We will set up a meeting. We will do a video conference for that. And until then, I will see you guys and all of your pets. Don't forget your pets on Thursday at 3:30. Bye.